Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets remind us how strange this season is by going toe-to-toe with the Milwaukee Bucks, only to lose in the closing sequences, and yet the strange NBA season continues, and the Brooklyn Nets continue to fall away from the lottery odds. We dive in next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Arbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Win big all season long when new customers can place just a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, just at a very, very high level, before we talk about specifics of this game, the idea that we would sit here on December 9th and talk about the Nets going toe-to-toe with the Milwaukee Bucks, back and forth trading buckets all the way down the wire of this game on Sunday, you wouldn't have fathomed it unless you had been watching the season all along.
Yeah, they pulled defeat from the jaws of victory. Like this game, I know this game ended up being a 5-point game. It was, I mean, obviously, if you watch, it was much, much closer than this. The Nets easily could have won this. They had multiple shots there at the end where they just weren't able to convert. Bucks were able to get them in transition, just like sort of going back the other way. A couple bounces of the ball here, and the Nets just take the W in this game. And it's just another sign that this season is just not, at least in the current iteration of the Nets, is just not a team that can just Washington Wizards style lay down and die for 82 games, right? Like there's certain teams that have it in them. The Wizards, there's some other ones out there that can just like just walk onto the court and legit roll over and die. The Nets, the Nets just don't have it in them. They you know, whether it's Schroeder, who we're going to talk about, Claxton we'll talk about later this week, but the Nets just don't have, and Cam Johnson obviously, they just don't have that dial to turn off. And in the moment, like watching yesterday's game, it's exciting. It's exciting to watch them go toe-to-toe with Giannis and Dame. We already kind of don't like the Bucks. There's a lot of things we don't like about the Bucks. And it's one of those ones where it's like, hey, they could have the draft pick too. But, man, it just makes it harder and harder every single game with these guys going by when you look at Tankathon to see, hey, if they're going to hang in every game here, yeah, we can just start kissing Cooper Flag goodbye. So we'll talk a lot about the Bucks game, but it's just like a testament on a high level, like you said, that the Nets season is just going, you know, example infinity, that this next season is going not the way we expected.
Well, it's even funny, too, because you go back and you think about the Nets obviously have met with the Milwaukee Bucks once before October, going back on the 27th, where they got that win, 116-102. But my God, that feels like such a long time ago when the Bucks were in total shambles to start the year. The Bucks over the last 13 games are 10-3. They are righting their ship. They're now a 12-11 team, above 500. They're 4-9, a blink of an eye ago. Literally less than a month ago, 3 weeks ago, they were 4-9. And you were wondering if, when you came into this game, would you be saying, hey, if you win it, you win it, because the Bucks pick is going to continue to rise here. We're actually going to get that one. We're trying to find the sweet spot, get away from the protections they have at the top of the draft, and then still have it land in our lap. And I think you said this even going back after that October 27th win for the Nets over the Bucks. It's a long season. And don't really necessarily worry too much about this Bucks pick, because when we turn around, it seems far less likely than some other teams that the Bucks are going to. Washington Wizards roll over and die on this season. They're too talented. And you're seeing that come to fruition here. And it's funny, man. When we talk about the Nets and now 10-15, you look at them, you say, okay, the season is long. And you're looking at it on both sides here. The Bucks, it felt like maybe it was going to be a disaster. Well, they're right back in the mix. Everything's probably going to be fine for them, relatively speaking. Same thing for the Nets. They've now lost 4 out of their last 5. So in spite of this hot start and all that we talk about, they are still finding their way to lose. It's that little thing about being deep enough in the lottery for a Cooper Flag that I think we've had to adjust our expectations around.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be the push and pull of the whole season. And, like, you know, we'll talk about this game and, like, sort of what are some of the components that keep the Nets in this, like, what are the components that keep the Nets in every one of these games? Because there's a few different pieces and like a few different themes that we've hit on over the course of the season, where it's like, okay, well, they're just doing these certain things, and that's what's making them, you know, stay competitive every single game. Unlike, I mean, the Wizards are the best example because they're 3-19 and they stink. And then you get other examples like the Pelicans out there, the Jazz. The Pelicans just have, like, every single guy's been injured, right? Yeah. Like, at some point, you just can't deal with all the injuries. The Jazz are just still kind of in that tanking mode. around the guys that they have, not a ton of talent. So they're 5-18. So, and then after that, like it actually, smooths out pretty quickly. Like the Nets aren't too far off the bad pace here, right? Like most teams outside of the three that I just mentioned are in that 7 to 10 win range, like that they're going to be competing with down the stretch when it comes to lottery odds, right? So it's not like they're just out of this mix here. But again, with every game that goes by and they stick with these teams like the Bucks, they've hung in basically every game this season, right? Like negative 3.7 differential, but they've been in just about everything. It's just,
and the one blowout against Orlando, sorry to interject, is really the one that skews those numbers, right? Take that one Orlando blowout loss away. And I think that the all these things we represented of kind of how the season has been for them. Very tight, close
great
games
call.
every single night.
Right. They have this like sort of one outlier game. And so it just shows that it's just going to be, this is what we're going to talk about so much over the course of the season. And good point by you mentioning earlier, like about like the part where your season outlook can change. Like we always kind of knew the Bucks weren't going to be horrible, right? You just can't have Giannis and be horrible. It's just impossible. It's just, you can't really do it. No matter who the other four guys are, if Giannis plus Dame, you're just never going to be really, really bad. It's just impossible. Now, if you're Philly and you just lose Embiid because he can't play because his knees are shot or whatever, and Paul George can't stay on the court for 2 consecutive games, well, then you might be in trouble, right? Like then you just lose all your guys. But these teams just can turn it on. And I guess the hope for Nets fans, as we sort of move into like the game for Schroeder and some of this other stuff, is the hope for Nets fans is that you kind of think about this as you think about the opposite effect happening, right? Like, okay,
right.
Like stay competitive, but continue to have games like this where it's just, you take the L in the end. Because I think that Nets fans are starting to see the writing on the wall here, where it's like, okay, these are fun, but again, we traded to get the Nets traded to get those Rockets picks back, right? Like to control this thing. It's like, let's just not make this for nothing. This is a generational draft. They can't really F around and find out on some of these lottery odds all the way to the end. And so again, to kind of circle back to the beginning, it makes this very, very weird push and pull for the season about like sort of how to react as a fan.
118 to 113 was the final here. 10-14 now. Excuse me. I already gave the Nets an extra loss on the year following this game on Sunday. They sit just outside the lottery odds, 15th position. In Milwaukee, they're there at 17th and continue to push themselves away from those lottery conversations. Coming up here in a second, though, as you said, some key performances. And there's a for the entirety of this game, there feels like there is one sequence very much pointed out on the broadcast that felt like it sewed this one up for Milwaukee. We'll get into that and the individual performances from Dennis Schroeder and Cam Johnson in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Mint Mobile. Look, the big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets with Mint Mobile. You'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Look, you can say goodbye to overpriced wireless plans when they get that jaw-dropping monthly bill. We've all had it happen to us out there, right? Those unexpected overages. Mint Mobile's here to rescue with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. You heard that number right. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan. Bring your phone number all along with your existing contacts. Check. Mint Mobile's got you covered. To get this new customer offer and get your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, kicking off what's going to be a long week here for Nets fans. You come off this loss, but then the Brooklyn Nets have, by the way, they've had this happen already, it feels like. We're 24 games in. I feel like we've said this 3 separate times where the Brooklyn Nets have long delays between their games. And we tend to notice these things when you're running a podcast and you want to be able to talk about the action. They won't play again until the 13th, this Friday. So just take the whole week off. Whole week off for the Brooklyn Nets. They'll come back against Memphis. That is a
buddy.
game.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it though, because you can't win any games you don't play. So that's what the Nets.
Touche. Classic silver lining, Doug. Don't worry. You never have to worry about a win if you never take the court. And that Memphis game, I was just saying, is the fill-in for another little dose of negativity. After the Nets got bounced out of the NBA Cup. So once you lose the group stage, they fill in your schedule because you're not going to be playing any meaningful games inside of that either. Now, before we talk about individual performances, again, this is a back and forth game, and it never is just the one thing that happened. There's dozens of sequences throughout the course of 48 minutes. But off the turnover, which the shot ends up coming with 30 seconds left on the clock from Keon Johnson in the corner. It's not Keon Johnson's fault, but he's the guy that pulls the trigger. They get the turnover, they break out, they have the 3-on-1, and Schroeder finds Keon in the corner. He ends up having to take the extra bounce dribble to kind of gather before he pulls that shot up. It misses, and you hear on the broadcast, they're like, they didn't need that right there. You're down, I think, 3 at that point. You can get the easy 2 with the advantage. Like the calculation in real time of, hey, quick bucket here, 30 seconds, let's play the foul game. Because once you miss that, now you go into the foul game, but now you're battling 2 possessions versus 1. And again, that's just the last 30 seconds of this game, but it is, of course, what stands out because the bucket doesn't go down. I think a missed Johnson 3-pointer after that as well.
Yeah, he missed the 3, and then they did make a 3 to cut it to 2 with DFS.
Yeah.
With about 17 seconds left.
Yes.
Look, I know fans hate this, and basketball purists really hate it, like more than anything else, because if you're growing up with the game you love, and you see a 3-on-1 break turn into a corner 3 for a guy like Keon Johnson, you probably want to just pull your hair out. But I don't mind the shot. Like, if you have a chance, corner 3s are statistically the very best shot in basketball besides the layup. Mm-hmm. And it's not, if the layup's not 100% guaranteed, then at that point, like, I don't mind going for it in that moment, especially when you are like the less talented team. And I know you're not doing all this algebra and calculus in the moment.
On the fly, right?
I know they're not. But the part where, so they're not doing all that calculation, but the part where they're doing the calculation is that the corner 3 is statistically the best shot, right? Mm-hmm. Basically. And because the expected value of the 3-pointer is, again, like second only to the layup, or free throws, but like those are like the very best shots you can get. And so at that point, the part where it's like drilled into him to take the best analytically expected value shot I got there, it is, I don't mind it. Again, so if you've been watching basketball your whole life and you pine for the grit and grind days of just like players all standing in the key and just bumping into each other and guys taking mid-range jumpers and whatever, you're gonna absolutely hate that shot. I don't mind it, and I understand that the result is not perfect, but that's been drilled into these guys. Like, these guys know, like majority, all these guys, they're playing an analytical approach game, like where they're just trying to get the math right, because that's kind of the only way to win when you have lesser talent. And that is almost the right shot there, even though it doesn't go down.
And I think, as I mentioned, like, there's the extra bounce that Keon takes to kind of gather there before the shot. If he catches it clean and shoots it, I probably don't even think twice about it, because it's just, to your point, you're driving the court, you're on the break, it's an open shooter, you find him, boom, boom, boom. And even if the shot misses, it's still about, good process, bad result. That's totally fine. So that
and by the way, one more thing with that, everyone gets thrown off too, because Ruko, who's great, like, he calls it out in the moment too. And sometimes if you get swayed by, again, I'm not blaming Ryan Ruko here, but like he says, oh, they didn't need that. And then you rewire your brain. You're like, they didn't need it, right? Like, they didn't need to take that shot.
Because I would say too, like, again, whether or not I'm fine with the shot, I am. But when you look at, as you mentioned, Dorian Finney-Smith goes on to hit a 3-pointer following the foul from Cam Johnson. So it's 113-108. And then Dorian comes down. He knocks down the triple. It's 113-111. And now it's just a single possession game. But at that point, it's 17 seconds. So, like, this is in real time, the math, the equation of it all. When you pull the trigger on the 3-pointer at 30 seconds, if it goes down, obviously, tie ball game, you reset everything, great. But if you get the easy 2, if we make the assumption of a 3-on-1 break and an easy 2, then you're saying it's a 1-point game. And when we make that foul, now the next possession, we're down 3. Like, so we're keeping, you're keeping that 1 possession game intact for a possession longer. Now, again, to your point, I overall agree. Because what am I doing here? I'm sitting here breaking down 4 subsequent sequences and what's going to happen, right? Predetermined outcome. Well, if you take the easy 2, then you go down, loose ball foul, Bucks make both their shots, and then, of course, Dorian Finney-Smith knocks down the triple. So you could easily reverse this, by the way. Keon Johnson makes the triple. They have the foul. Dorian comes down. He misses his 3, right? So in the end, it all comes out in the wash, which I think is basically to your point. The best play on the court in today's NBA is find those open shooters, those corner threes. So they pull the trigger, they miss. And I almost just pointed out as you're there in these late moments. And then you can also think to, as we'll talk about later this week, well, if Claxton doesn't have the game that he does, if 2 of the players we're going to highlight here, Schroeder and Cam Johnson, if they don't have the nights that they have, are we even having the conversation about whether or not these sequences went right? You need big performances combining for 50 between Johnson and Schroeder, something that now has become kind of the norm for the Nets this season.
Buddy, you said 50. Combined for 60. These guys.
Well, if I have to do, listen, again, just like the Nets trying to do the analytics on the fly, I can't crunch numbers and be as affable as I am on the podcast. So
yeah, it's impossible. Yeah,
guess what? 60 better than 50.
Exactly. You can't be good at everything. I know this all too well. No, but I think also too, this speaks to sort of like the Nets season in general too, is that they are operating at a baseline level of talent significantly below most other teams in the league. That is, they played very hard, but if you just line up their talent, up and down their first 7 guys, like when you play a team like the Bucks and you're just like, okay, Giannis, you're like, okay, well, no one close, no one close talent wise. Dame,
1.5 of our guys.
Okay, so they already have the Bucks already have the 2 best guys, of the team that are going right now, the 2 teams that are going, and then we can just quibble about like where everyone else lands. Okay, fine, like but Giannis is so much better, and as evidenced by how he just took them absolutely to task in this game. It was just once he gets going downhill, he's impossible to stop. Right, 14 for 22 from the field, 34 points, crushed him in the transition. If he got ahead of steam, it was over. Even getting DFS back, who's been pretty good about defending him in the past, didn't really speed bump him all that much. My point is, in these games, the Nets are have to. It's like any sport, but like football is sometimes a good example. It's like, hey, we're down 1, we're the way worse team. We just scored. We're going for 2 to win. Like we just can't get into an overtime game here. We're down. Like we're just down talent. Like let's just go for the W here and be done with it. So I think that I like the Nets approach overall. And I think it is this approach, this aggressive approach around just trying to win, take threes, just, do everything you can in the moment to be able to try to win the games. I like that. It's actually a non-conservative approach that's gotten the Nets this far. They're taking non-conservative approaches to sometimes very fundamental things. Like we talk about a lot of times, they press the ball handlers a lot. No team really does that. Like on a game-to-game basis, they press opposing ball handlers just to make things super annoying. That's an unconventional approach. It has a huge downside because if you get beat, now it's a 5-on-4, right? If that guy gets beat, the reason teams don't do it is because it can exhaust you. And if the primary ball handler gets past you, now it's sort of like a mini transition break. So I like the non-conventional approach, and it just has high risk, high reward sometimes.
And it's funny too, because as you mentioned, teams with higher talent levels don't need to press the ball as much because they can trust their 5-on-5 basketball going both ways.
And you just can't tell LeBron to go press. You're not just going to go. You're not going to tell these guys to go do it. And by the way, that's smart. I wouldn't do it either. Yes. You just shouldn't do it. It would exhaust these. It needlessly exhaust them.
Let's talk about here in a second, not only Schroeder and Cam Johnson, but also a couple of key stats out of this game that we've seen before this season that are reminders of how over their head the Nets are playing, given some of these stats. We'll do have to close things out here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at we got to go. We got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, there's no better time to get in the action over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You can tackle the NFL action, the NBA action. It's all right now. New customers get about $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, on the NBA. It's all in one place. You're going to grab a hunch in the middle of the game. We all have it. Maybe it's late in the game. You see the net. It probably wasn't up here live all the way at the end there, but you see Keon Johnson pulling. You're like, oh, this is going to get the Nets the W. It wouldn't have worked out in the moment, but sometimes you get those hunches. FanDuel is going to let you work through them. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 real money bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we close out today's Locked On Nets episode, obviously talking about the close matchup, the close battle, and the loss, 118-113 to the Bucks. You see up there if you're watching live on YouTube, we were thinking there's a lot of players to get to here, including Nick Claxton, this is one of the more impressive all-around games that he put together. We're going to talk about this week before we get to Friday's game. We're also going to talk about Dennis Schroeder, who's been incredibly consistent and a veteran. But for right now, let's just stay focused in on Cam Johnson because he had another good game, another great game. I mean, by his standards, the fact that you even refer to it as good now is almost an indication of how the bar has shifted on him. And he's the most critical piece in this process for the Brooklyn Nets when it comes to trade possibilities, when it comes to moving these pieces. How much do you think a game like this maybe helps move it along? It's like you mentioned DFS before. Hey, he's been really good guarding a guy like Giannis in games in the past. So that can signal to other teams value, right? Like, hey, here is value. Whether or not this is a high leverage game on December 8th in an NBA season, Cam Johnson has now basically, outside of a couple of outliers, shown up and been I will give you 20 plus points night in, night out, consistent play on both ends. I think in a game against Milwaukee, other NBA teams probably looking and go, okay, like this guy's up to the task if we're going to bring him in and immediately plug him into a starting role. It's not often you have that type of grab to go get on the NBA market at a deadline in the way that we think about Cam Johnson.
Yeah, Cam has been so good. I'm going to go through a couple of stats here, which are going to sort of highlight it. One quick thing though. I mean, on Schroeder, we're not bearing. We know Schroeder had the absolute game here. We're just going to do an entire episode about Dennis Schroeder tomorrow. So like, it's no worries there. He's going to get full
full flowers at his feet.
Full flowers. He's just going to be like, we're just so far into this at this point that it just doesn't make sense to just not just go and we'll talk a little bit about Cam because we talk so much about him, but we'll do a whole thing about Schroeder. With Cam, the numbers are kind of ridiculous. Like he, at this point, we're going to highlight this every time, 49% from the field, 43.4% from three, 90.7 from the line. So he's basically a 50-40-90 guy at this point. And if you look at effective field goal percentage throughout the NBA of guys that are playing more than 26 minutes, right? So not just some guys who have run hot and just like spot starters or whatever, guys who are playing like real minutes this season. Cam is, let me see, they don't label this right. He's 13th overall in effective field goal percentage. If I bump it up to over 30 minutes, so like dudes who are playing real minutes, he's fourth. Yeah. He's like fourth in the NBA in effective field goal percentage. By the way, effective field goal percentage is always weighted to guys who are just centers because they stand under the basket and dunk, right? Yeah. So it's just like they don't take any of their shots unless you're standing wide open under the basket, and then you just dunk the ball, and hopefully you can hit a couple free throws if you get fouled. And that's why your effective field goal percentage is higher, because the guys that are above, like basically at 30 minutes or above him, are like Walker Kessler, Jared Allen, Josh Hart's in there. He's been awesome. He plays a lot around the rim too. Vooch, Sabonis, right? Gobert. Like these are the guys, Al Horford. These are the guys that are above him right now. So basically, this is all to say, Cam Johnson's been like one of the very best, like efficient scorers in the whole league this year around a stat that usually just highlights guys who are like 7-footers.
Right.
And so, and the fact that he's taking a majority of his shots from beyond the arc is just totally sick. He's been so good. So thank God he didn't play like this last year.
Oh God.
Because they never would have traded McHale. They would have built around that. I'm telling you right now, they never would have done it.
It's like all of those stats, which are at the high level this season for Cam Johnson. I mean, how about this for a snapshot of Cam Johnson? Last 3 games, right? Orlando, Pacers, Bucks. He's played, by the way, 36, 36, and 36, 35, and 38 minutes. So that's something that you never would have thought. He's playing career high in minutes this season for the Brooklyn Nets. He's knocked down 49% from the field. So he's only a percent away from being a 50-50-90 guy, because he's also knocked down 50% from beyond the arc. And he's done that 2 of 5, 7 of 13, 4 of 8 in this game against Milwaukee. And even the small details of what his season has looked like, 94% over those last 3 games from the line. He's hitting his free throws at an incredibly high clip. 26 points every single game. He's just a 26-point performer over the start of December. It has been nothing short of impressive what he's been able to string together. There have been, I said before, few and far between, and it is true. There's only been a couple of games. You have to go back over the last, I have 1 game where he scored single digits against the Golden State Warriors on November 25th. You have to go back to one other day, the 13th in November, when he scored single digits. That's 2 single-digit performances over the last 2 months. Go back and check him last season. There were games when it just felt like, remember, can Cam Johnson even be a guy that's on the floor and you trust to be able to do X and Y on both ends of the basketball court? Something about Mikal Bridges being removed off this team, and maybe about the premise of what this year was going to be for veteran players. We talk about Schroeder, right? We talk about Cam Johnson in this way, even Dorian Finney-Smith in his different role. Something about it just seems to have finally clicked for Cam Johnson. And while the prime of his career at 28 years old now, the prime of his career may only be this and next season, right? Like based on just how long he's played in the NBA already. Sometimes you're a late bloomer. For the love of God, I leave you with my final thoughts for the episode. Find the team that wants this guy and make the trade, because it's never going to be better. And there's no way, even if you're observing from the outside other NBA teams, you never thought that you were going to see this from Cam Johnson on the Brooklyn Nets this season over the first 24 games. So it is a rare instance when, yes, the price point actually can move a little bit. And Sean Marks actually probably does have some leverage when it comes to the negotiating table around him.
I mean, please just don't get hurt. Like they just.
Well, that's the other. For the love of God, now shut him down.
This run out.
Games to start December. Don't play.
This run out is so pure. Like it really just couldn't have worked out any better.
And he's had a couple of close call scares. Like he's had a couple,
yeah,
and he's bounced right back, been right back in the next games. Haven't seen him miss any time at all. So it's not like the Nets haven't already kind of played a little bit with house money here, running him out there for max minutes and not having him go down with an injury.
Totally. He could miss, by the way, real quick, he could miss his next 15 threes and still be shooting 40% from beyond the arc of the season, right? So like he's got some regression built in already onto the numbers just looking good. And so, which, look, it comes for us all. He's going to miss some shots, presumably. It just kind of really hasn't happened up until now. So he's got to stick. You're just, at this point, you're just hoping for the health. You're hoping that other teams see it. We made a list of teams last week that we thought would be like sort of good landing spots. We got some pushback. They're like, well, those picks aren't going to be any good. Yeah, we get it. We know. No one needs to explain to us that like how good teams don't have good draft picks. It's like the Nets aren't going to get something where it's like former lottery pick plus sick pick plus matching money for Cam Johnson, right? Like it's just, that's not going to happen. They don't need it to happen, by the way. Good draft pick was, or, maybe two bad firsts with some matching money, or young player plus some matching money. Like that's all good enough at this point for him. And I can't say this enough. This guy hasn't just been some pillar of health over his career. They cannot screw around too long with this and hope that it's just like he stays healthy and it's all good, right? Like the deadline is still 2 months away.
The find out scenario is real for the Brooklyn Nets with getting value for Cam Johnson.
It's basically 2 months exactly from today is the trade deadline. And so they just have to capitalize it now. And I just hope there's enough teams out there that see it and can kind of do the math themselves, because going back to the beginning with like analytically speaking, this guy is analytically like one of the best players in basketball this season.
Yes.
Like and other teams, smart teams should understand that.
You better believe it. That's it for me, by the way, just to reiterate. Full episode coming on Dennis Schroeder and what his value has been to this team and how great his season has been. What does his market look like when we talk about trades for the NBA? Claxton and his performance here. And we'll even spend a little time talking about Ben Simmons, just 18 minutes, and seemingly watching his role get reduced here. All those things coming up this week, though. I sort of close out the show, but you do it, though. I know you like to do it.
All right, look, you got to go over there. Where I realize I just haven't looked at this in a couple of days, but we're 250 subscribers from 8,000 over on YouTube. 200. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube, I don't even know what to tell you. By the way, do I care if you watch on YouTube? Not really. I just want you to subscribe. Just go over there, hit subscribe. Basically, that will tell the algorithm that you'll want the videos anyway. Good enough. So whether you watch, whether you don't, who cares? Adam cares. I don't. Just hit subscribe. Just make sure go over to YouTube and hit subscribe. Let's get to 8,000.
I have an ego. It needs a boost sometimes. So feel free to watch, but also to subscribe. Definitely subscribe. Listen. There is no limits to what you can accomplish except the limits that you place on your own thinking. Brian Tracy right there. And I think probably talking about subscribing. Don't limit yourself. Subscribe to the YouTube.
I never heard of him, but going to assume one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.